What's up, guys? This is Ian here, coach of your Ladner Lantern, bringing you guys the first episode of the NCL Season 2 Transaction Series. This is a series where I will be going over all of the transactions made during the past week and sort of what it means for each team that's making these transactions, how they can maybe use transactions in the future, and just sort of covering transactions. I'll say this now, I'll probably say this at the beginning of every episode. Week 8 is the final week to make transactions so that rosters are completely finalized through weeks 9, 10, 11, 12, and into the playoffs. Every team is allowed 3 free agent transactions and an unlimited amount of trades. Trades themselves are probably more beneficial to teams based on point trades, although many teams will choose to use their free agent transactions. There is no requirement for teams to use all of their free agent transactions, sorry. They only have a limit of 3. Today, I actually have 6 transactions for you, so this may be one of the longer editions of the episode. These are transactions that were, what's the word that I'm looking for? Not proposed, but maybe made? Not made. Okay, I'm kind of lost in what the wording I want to be is. Maybe I'll just like look up what I've written down really quickly here. Sorry, this is a little bit messy for the first one, but we'll sort of pick it up as we go. Submitted. Okay, these are the transactions that were submitted for week 0. All of these transactions are active for the week 1 battles, which you can check out on many of the coaches' YouTube channels coming up this week. Week 1 does start the day that I'm filming this. Week 1 starts today. You guys will see this the day after week 1 starts. And yeah, so let's get right into things. First off, Magic, coach of the Snowpoint City Blizzard, decided to make a drop. I believe it was, let me just quickly check what day that he made that was. He made that drop the day after the draft ended. So the first transaction is Magic, and he ends up dropping Shaman for Ludicolo. Um, you guys won't have seen Magic's draft breakdown yet from the NCL perspective, but I did like Shaman on his team. I know that he didn't think it was that great, and I think Ludicolo is definitely a Pokemon that increases his offensive pressure. Now, Shaman is a very offensive mon. It can also be very defensive, which Ludicolo kind of lacks, although it can run like a Leech Seed Rain Dish set that works pretty well on his Rain team. However, I really admired Shaman for the status absorption that it gave to Magic's team. Ludicolo is another Rain Sweeper along with his Kingdra, so that's pretty beneficial for him. This is the first transaction that he is using, so he does have 2 more transactions remaining, as you can see down in there in the bottom left. Swapping a grass type for a grass and water type, it's okay. He's giving a fire weakness for pretty much nothing, honestly. Water kind of covers the rest of Shaman. Um, it does, sorry, a fire and an ice weakness. So ice is neutral, fire is neutral on Ludicolo. A rain sweeper potentially with the swift swim. Ludicolo is also a much better dancer than Shaman is. I think you can see that in the sprites on the screen. I like Ludicolo on Magic's team. Again, I liked Shaman on his team as well. Ludicolo is definitely going to put up more pressure as a sweeper. The only thing I don't like about this is that he's picking up another water type. Now, that's basically standard on a rain team, but at the same time, it still means his team is weak to ice, which is kind of the big thing. Magic did end up choosing to make a second transaction on the same day, same time, dropping Masquerain for Klefki. This is an interesting drop. I personally wasn't a huge fan of Masquerain on the team. I think with Rain you already have enough speed control that you don't need webs either. I like that he made this drop. He did pick up some speed control with Prankster Thunderwave on the Klefki. He also picked up some spikes for himself, which he already had in Coolfish, but he picked up Prankster Spikes, I guess. So more spike setting, which is pretty cool. I like the fact that Klefki's on this team. He didn't have a fairy before, so it's an upgrade in that standard. He's losing his 4x rock weakness in exchange for rock resist, which I think is really cool. Worthy to note, actually, that the Shaman for Ludicolo drop gained him 20 points. 40 points, sorry, because Shaman was tier 3, Ludicolo was tier 4. Masquerain was tier 4, Klefki was tier 2, so that is a 60-point difference between the two of them. So he's down another 20 points. Magic at the beginning of this had 120 free points to spend left in his roster. He still has 100 free points to spend, which means he can exchange pretty much anything for anything. The only thing he can't do is upgrade a tier 5 to a tier 1. But he could upgrade a tier 4 to a tier 1. No, he couldn't. Could he? No, he couldn't. He could upgrade a tier 3 to a tier 1 at the very least. If he has any tier 3s sitting around, he could grab another tier 1 if he so chooses. This is his second transaction of the season, so he does only have one left. Again, I think it's pretty solid. I mean, realistically, the reason that he took Masquerain was for webs. It can be a decent Quiver Dance sweeper, but I think Klefki sort of fills a nice utility role in the team and takes spike pressure off of Quillfish, so Quillfish can be in more of a sweeper role for him. Again, big fan of this trade. Next up, we have Ben or Fizzle the Hizzle dropping Pinsir for Kecleon. I think this is fairly straightforward drop, to be honest, from my perspective. You guys still another draft breakdown that you won't have seen from the NCL's perspective, but I did kind of question the Pinsir pick a little bit, and in Ben's own draft breakdown, which you can go find. I might just link it in the description, or if I end up forgetting to link it in the description, all of the coaches named in this video, all of their channels will be in the description, so you'll at least be able to find Ben's draft breakdown on his channel. Yeah, so I was questioning this, and I'm kind of still questioning this. Kecleon is definitely a much more versatile tier 5 pick for him. I really like the Kecleon. It is another normal type along with Licky Licky, but Kecleon doesn't really function as a normal type necessarily. It does have the Protean ability, which lets it transform into the type of the move that it chooses. So it also has some good priority options, with which Pinsir didn't. And previously, I believe, I'm not actually looking at his team at the moment, but I believe only Mega Scizor had priority on his team. Let me just bring up his team really quickly so that I can see that. Emboar, Mega Scizor, and Gengar if you're spicy. And Primarina, I guess, were his priority uses before. Pinsir got Quick Attack, but Kecleon provides Stab, Sucker Punch, Stab, Shadow Sneak, which is really cool. It's a Stealth Rocker just like Pinsir was, so he's not giving up the Stealth Rocks that he actually kind of desperately needed. Yeah, so this isn't functioning the same way that Licky Licky is, his other normal type, so I'm a fan of that. It's much more versatile than Pinsir is, although he does lose a ground resist, which I actually think is a little bit big. So on his team, at the moment, he has an immunity to ground in Zapdos and one resist in Sceptile, and an immunity in Mesprit, but I'm not necessarily counting Levitate as an immunity because there are a lot more Mold Breaker Mons these days. Although he does have his own Mold Breaker Mon, he took one off the table. So I guess I'm okay with him losing this ground resist. I just don't think that Sceptile is a reliable ground resist for him. I think he's going to rely on Zapdos to switch into ground moves quite a bit. Not that his team's super weak to ground, but taking ground hits neutrally can always be dangerous. Earthquake is a very powerful base power move. Yeah, so that's kind of Ben's drops. Next up, Dom or Rudiger 67 and the Cleveland Escavaliers made 2 drops themselves. They ended up dropping Galvantula for Crobat. I like this a lot. I didn't think that he needed sticky webs on his team to function. I think Crobat is a really nice pivot option on his team that he kind of had but kind of didn't have before. He had Greninja, Gligar, and Jirachi. So he has like actually I shouldn't say that. He has quite a few good U-turners on his team. I like the pivot option. Crobat also gives him a speed tier that he was lacking before. Base 130 speed really is going to help out his team. Before that, Greninja was the fastest, and there are a few things that go above Greninja that Crobat can kind of cover. I liked the idea of Galvantula. I liked the electric typing, but you'll see that he's gonna deal with that in a second. The bug typing he already had with Armaldo anyways, so it's not the biggest deal that he's dropping Galvantula here. I think Galvantula could have been neat utility on his team, but in reality, I'm not entirely sure how many times he would have been able to bring Galvantula to most matchups. I think that he's going to have to rely on bringing a few of his bulky mons, Charizard X, and then Jirachi, and then take your pick most weeks anyways. So I don't know if Galvantula necessarily fit on this team. Crobat's a nice defogger for him as well. So now he's got the Crobat, the Gligar, and the Armaldo for hazard control. Um, this was a tier 3 for a tier 3 drop, so he didn't mess up any points there. He had no free points to deal with anyways, so that was just a straight trade for trade. And that left him with 2 free agents, and then he actually used another one, trading Hitmonchan for Electrode. So he loses the Rapid Spinner in Hitmonchan, but he'd already picked up the Defogger and Crobat. So he replaced Hazard Removal for Hazard Removal, and he upgraded his speed tiers quite a ton. Electrode is a base 150 mon. This is a tier 5 for tier 5 trade, so straight up for straight up, I personally have the opinion that Hitmonchan might have functioned a tiny bit better on this team. I think a fighting type is something that you generally want in the format, but I do like Electrode as a pivot for him. Excuse me. It's a really good pivot. It's extremely fast. It's a taunt user, which is really cool. He's losing out on some priority in the Hitmonchan and the Galvantula. Galvantula got Sucker Punch, Hitmonchan got Mach Punch. However, Electrode's fast enough that it doesn't really care about priority, if that makes any sense. It doesn't need to go faster than things because it outspeeds the entire metagame. Electrode, the only thing that is on its speed level in the format or on our tier list is Mega Aerodactyl, which Phil has, and Electrode, in my opinion, has a better matchup against the Aerodactyl than Aerodactyl does against it. So that is Dom's 2 drops. Not really much to talk about with the Electrode. It's kind of a basic sort of trade-off there. He got rid of one Volt Switcher and picked up a Hazard Remover, and then he got rid of a Hazard Remover and picked up another Volt Switcher. I think he's getting better value out of this because his speed tiers are upgrading. I don't believe he had a flying type before. He did not have a flying type. Oh, he did. He had Gligar, but it doesn't. I don't know. Crobat is a very reliable fighting resist for him as well. Not that he didn't already have fighting resist, but just to cover up for Linoon and the Greninja. And yeah, that's excuse me, it's quite late when I'm recording this. Yeah, I like these drops on his team. I think they are going to function pretty well for him. Crobat can kind of just Brave Bird spam to tell the heavens go. And he actually didn't have a poison type on his team before, so I like that upgrade because he already had bug and he replaces electric. So he loses out on fighting, picks up poison. I think poison is pretty useful in a metagame where fairies kind of run supreme. Yeah, I think these are good drops. Then the final drop for week 0 was by Austin and the Atlanta Star Raptors. He ended up dropping Frogadier for the Ferroseed. He initially had picked up Frogadier because of its use of spikes, which it actually doesn't get. Greninja is the one that gets spikes, and it turns out Frogadier, despite being an evolutionary beginning to Greninja, does not actually get the spikes. It gets the toxic spikes. I believe toxic spikes is an egg move for the Froakie line. Excuse me, but Spikes is a level up move for Greninja that you actually have to relearn at level 28 or something. So upgrading to a Spiker, really good resist Pokemon in Ferroseed, in my opinion. I think that in terms of Frogadier, it was a much more offensive threat for his team, and Ferroseed, while Tangrowth and Empoleon sort of cover the steel and the grass, I like Ferroseed as a hazard setter and just as a general utility mon. Just frees up Empoleon to do a little bit more on his team as well. I think Frogadier, like he already had Keldeo for a water type, and Frogadier wasn't doing too much. It was fitting in between a speed tier that he didn't really need to fit in between because he already had some base 95s and a base 100. So I like the upgrade to Ferroseed here. I think it's going to put in some work for him, and I think, yeah, this is a fairly basic trade. It's tier 5 for tier 5, right? So maybe I shouldn't have to talk about this one too much, but pretty solid trade overall. So those are your free agent transactions for week 0. In terms of usage of the transactions, Austin now has 2 free agent transactions remaining. Magic has 1, Ben has 2, and Dom has 1. All of the other coaches still have all 3 of their transactions remaining. Potentially, we may see some drops after week 1 once some teams have figured out sort of what's not going to work on their team and maybe what has really bad matchups for the rest of the season. So keep an eye out. There may or may not be a free agent transaction video every single week. That is based on whether or not any coaches make any transactions or not. Last season we had not very many transactions. This is the most. We might have had 6 the entire season, honestly, and 6 in week 0 I think is a little bit crazy. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled. They may or may not be out. If they are going to be out, then you can expect them on a Tuesday. That is all from me, and I hope you guys have a great day.